Welcome to the show. You're watching the Fox Business Network. Okay, let's break down this controversy over the Joint Chiefs of Staff Chair, General Mark Milley. The White House downplaying allegations in a new book loaded with anonymous sources by Bob Woodward and Robert Costa, saying that it was routine. The White House saying it was routine for the general to call his counterpart in China. Joining us now, former National Security Advisor to Vice President Mike Pence. He's retired Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg. General, it's great to have you back on. What's your reaction to this controversy?
Yeah, Liz, thanks for having me on tonight. I think there's a lot of cleanup in aisle 3 going on right now. And you can see it with the spokesman from the Defense Department and talking about what happened on the 8th. And I'm looking really at the 8th of January and what Mark Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, did. Look, he's got 3 roles. He's the principal military advisor to the president. He's the principal military advisor to the Secretary of Defense and the principal military advisor to the National Security Council. That's it. Anything else he does there, he has no command and control of forces at all. And all his power emanates from the President of the United States. And under Section 2, Article 2 of the Constitution, there's only one commander-in-chief. And that, at the time, that was Donald J. Trump. So if he went out on his own, and you're seeing the acting Secretary of Defense saying he was not informed of what happened on the 8th of January, Mark Milley did it on his own. He was wrong. I mean, that is not something he should be doing unless he talked to the President or the Secretary of Defense, the National Security Advisor, which he did not do.
So there's, yeah, go ahead, finish.
Go ahead.
Well,
no, I think when you look at the responsibility that he's got out there and civilian control of the military, that's a process. There's no set template you follow, but the process is he reports to the president and talks to the president before he talks to anybody else.
So, you know, there's talk of him breaking the chain of command. That's what the media has been going on about, but you're saying he's not even in the chain of command. He's technically outside it. You know, there was always this, and by the way, why is this book coming out now? There's all this talk about, you know, that Trump operated outside of the rule of law when it looks like General Milley was doing that.
Yeah, you know what, the reason I'm keying in on 8 January, we all know what was happening in Washington, D.C. And for him to reach out to the Chinese, who are an adversary, and talking about nuclear strikes or command and control, he had to know he was implying that there was a concern about the command and control we had in Washington, D.C., that I might be going off the rails. That's the furthest from the truth. I was in the Oval List. I was in the West Wing when all of this was going on. Everybody was in control. It was a very calm environment. Was the president mad about something? Sure. But you get mad, I get mad, everybody gets mad about going forward. And I've seen him in tough crisis situations. And he's very, very calm and assured when he makes those decisions. I mean, if you don't believe me, think about what we did with Soleimani. Think about what we did with Baghdadi. Think about what we did with ISIS. Think about what we did with the Syrian strikes when they used nerve gas. The president made those hard decisions at all times. So I think Milley was kind of saying, well, I'm a little bit concerned about the situation here, and I'll reach out to the Chinese on my own to tell them, hey, don't worry about it. It's all under control. He was way out of line for doing that. And if those reports are true, again, it's a caveat, if those reports are true, then he should not be chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
We hear you. So, you know, why was he talking to Nancy Pelosi at all? And Trump said, I was never going to attack China. Why does anybody, it makes D.C. look like bonkers, like they're nuts down there. Does anybody really seriously believe Trump was going to attack China?
No. Now, look, Liz, and I'm sure the former president will get mad if I said this, but President Trump was a reluctant warrior. And I say that with great admiration as a former military guy. He would not use military force or commit American men and women to battle unless he was absolutely assured we were going to get the job done. And I really, really admired that in him, because he knew that what it meant when we put our men and women in a conflict situation. Look, we were the only administration, Liz, that did not start a major war in the last 5 administrations. He didn't do that. And so when I say that, again, reluctant warrior, I'm very proud to say that about him. And he wasn't going to do that. In fact, I'll tell you the three words I never heard in the month of January. I didn't hear about China, I didn't hear about Russia, and I didn't hear about nukes. I mean, he never talked like that at all.
We hear you. And, you know, we've got Republican Senators Marco Rubio, Senator Rand Paul, even retired Lieutenant General Vindman. He was a star witness in the first impeachment of President Trump. He's calling for General Milley to step down. Let's listen to Senator John Kennedy on this. Watch this.
Based on his behavior in the last year or two, we don't have a military leader. We've got a politician. My Democratic friends are going to probably sweep that under the rug, but I'm ready to hold hearings. I think General Milley has a lot of explaining to do, and I think he ought to stop bellowing and honking on like a goose about white rage and actually try to make our country more secure.
It just feels so overly political by a general to be involved in stuff like this. I mean, it just sounds so crazy what is going on in Washington. It makes us look crazy to the rest of the world. And by the way, we've got North Korea and South Korea shooting off missiles. We've got intelligence officials warning Al-Qaeda could attack the U.S. from Afghanistan within a year's time, and that's the conservative estimate. That's the Defense Intelligence Agency officials warning that. So, you know, that's going on with General Milley while also these serious threats are happening. Your final word, General.
Yeah, well, the senator just nailed it. And I think when you lose Vindman, you've really lost it, if he's even against what you're doing out there. And I would just have to say, look, I think Mark Milley really did go beyond the bounds, and he's actually become very, very political. He's alienated a large part of the population out there, and he needs to look real hard at what he's been doing. And the senator's right. This administration is just going to try to walk right by it, and hopefully in 2 weeks you're going to forget about it. One final comment. He should have addressed this, General Milley, right away. He should have come in front of the press and addressed it right away. The fact that he's not doing it for 2 weeks does not speak well. If somebody accused me of treason, I'd be out front like today.
General Keith Kellogg, thank you for your service to our country. And again, it's always great having you on.